I want to rank my top 10 college football quarterbacks since 2010. Now, I saw On3 do this on their social media platforms, and I just strongly disagree with it. So I said, you know what? Why not me come up with my own top 10 college football QBs since 2010? This ranking is solely based on my opinion, so if you disagree, I would love to see your top 10 down in the comment section down below if you're listening to this on YouTube. The guy I'm going to start off with is RG3, Robert Griffin III. At Baylor, this dude was one of the most accurate dual-threat quarterbacks in college football at the time. He was completing over 70% of his passes. The year he won the Heisman, he had 37 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. So not only was this guy a really accurate passer, but he also was a fantastic decision maker. And then he also had 669 rushing yards on the ground and 10 TDs. He ended up winning the Heisman Trophy in 2011. And the reason why he's not a lot higher on this list is just because he didn't really have the kind of individual success that some of the other guys ranked higher than him did. He wasn't able to get Baylor into the college football national championship picture, even though they were really good under RG3. It's just that there were certain times, there were big games where he kind of wasn't able to get it done. And it wasn't mostly due to him. It's just the fact that Baylor, overall as a program, they kind of had a peak. And their peak kind of wasn't national championship level. Their peak kind of was Alamo Bowl, which they went to under RG3. So RG3 comes in at number 10 for me. I really loved watching RG3. He was one of my favorite players when I first started watching college football around 2010, 2011. He was on the cover of NCAA 13, so that also made me gravitate towards him a lot. At number 9, I got Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota was really good at the University of Oregon, especially under Chip Kelly. And a lot of people kind of, I think, underrate Marcus Mariota. When you think about Heisman Trophy winners, if you were to rank them in order from best to worst, like a lot of people probably would have Marcus Mariota way low on that tier. But Marcus Mariota, man, was a really phenomenal dual threat quarterback. I think he was even better than RG3. This dude was an even better decision maker than Robert Griffin III. The year he won the Heisman, this dude threw 42 touchdowns, only had 4 interceptions. That's one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in the whole entire college football that year. Not just that, but this dude was really deadly when he decided to tuck the football and run. Now, he didn't have the kind of shiftiness and agility that guys like Lamar Jackson and RG3 did. He just had really fantastic straight line speed. But I remember watching Marcus Mariota go crazy and those fantastic uniforms that Oregon always seems to have. And when he ended up out-dueling Jameis Winston in the college football semifinals, the first year the college football playoffs was implemented, that was one of the best matchups that I was excited to watch. And Marcus Mariota and Oregon, they just completely clobbered Florida State that year. That was the year when Jameis Winston and FSU had all those damn comebacks. And the reason why I'm so high on Marcus Mariota is because I was telling a lot of my homeboys at the time that FSU was going to lose that game because, you know, Florida State was kind of at their peak at that point. And I live in the state of Florida, so there were a lot of Seminole fans around me. And I was telling them leading up to that game that Marcus Mariota was going to dominate them and that they were going to get blown out. They weren't going to be able to come back against that Marcus Mariota and that Oregon offense. So Marcus Mariota comes in at number 9 for me. At number 8, we're starting to really get into it now. Bryce Young. Some of you guys may disagree with this. Some of y'all may be like, man, you got Bryce Young as your top 10 QB since 2010? Hell yeah. Like, have y'all watched Alabama football the last 2 years? Bryce Young carried these boys. Nick Saban, the year they lost to Georgia in the national championship game, he called that a rebuilding year. Alabama was not expected to even beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. And when you think about most of the losses that Alabama has had with Bryce Young being the starting quarterback, I believe most of them have come with this dude not even being on the field. You remember when they lost to LSU last year to that 2-point conversion that ultimately won the game for them? Bryce Young wasn't on the field. He didn't have a chance to clap back. But it seems like every time Bryce Young was put in a high pressure situation and he had to produce, this guy came up every single time. This guy just is cold-blooded. I think he's one of the clutchest quarterbacks in the history of college football. Anytime Bryce Young had the ball in his hands to win the game, he came through. You remember that game against Texas? I mean, this dude is just unbelievable. And this dude's body is built like a damn preschooler. And yet, this dude's football IQ is just out of this world. Not just that, he's a fantastic passer. He makes great decisions with the football. There's a reason why he was the #1 overall pick by the Carolina Panthers. Like, I kind of think that Bryce Young is really underrated. And you think about how guys like Kyler Murray, how well they performed, but Bryce Young was even better than him. I mean, this dude, Bryce Young, was a real cerebral quarterback. And I think over the next decade, I don't think he's going to end up getting the proper recognition. A lot of people think, oh, you play for Alabama, so you're automatically playing with the best talent. That's not the case all the time. Go back and watch the last 2 years of Alabama football. It was the Bryce Young show. That's the reason why he won the Heisman Trophy in 2021. And it wasn't really a huge discussion about it, man. Like, this dude was carrying Alabama on his shoulders. Yeah, he had some good players that he was throwing the football to. He had John Mechie, Jamison Williams. But if you take Bryce Young off of these 2 past years, Alabama squads, do you think they go as far as what they did? Probably not. Remember, Nick Saban considered 2021 to be a rebuilding year. Going into the SEC championship in 2021, they were coming off a 4 overtime win against Auburn. Their offensive line struggled for the majority of that whole entire season. Like, Bryce Young was really the glue that was keeping Alabama together. And I'm really intrigued in seeing in 2023 how Alabama's going to perform without Bryce Young. Because last season, outside of Bryce Young, the only dude who he really had was Jahmyr Gibbs, who was coming up and being consistent. So many people, when they think about Alabama football, they just automatically assume that whoever's playing quarterback is just throwing to the best talent. They just have the best offensive line, the best coaching, and Bryce Young didn't really have that. And when you think about all of the quarterbacks that Nick Saban has had during his time at Alabama, without a doubt, Bryce Young is the most talented quarterback. He's better than Tua, Jalen Hurts, Mac Jones, A.J. McCarron, and whoever else Nick Saban had playing that QB during his tenure at Alabama. Like, I really think that Bryce Young is just incredibly underrated and overlooked when you think about some of the best quarterbacks who have came through college football. I think that Bryce Young probably isn't going to get a lot of agreement for being on this top 10. But when you go back and you look at what he meant to Nick Saban and that Alabama football program, he really held them boys together, man. Because if it wasn't for him, I don't think Alabama would have made it to the playoffs in 2021. And I definitely don't think they would have been as good as what they were last year. They probably would have lost 3, maybe 4 games last season had it not been for Bryce Young. Number 7, I have Lamar Action Jackson, man. Like, Lamar Jackson, bro, this dude, he kind of came out of nowhere. Even though I was already a little bit hip to Lamar Jackson from his freshman year, this dude took college football by storm. You remember that big game when he went off against FSU? When they were like the second best team in college football at the time, this dude had 146 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, bruh. Like, Jimbo Fisher and Florida State's defense had no answer for Lamar Jackson, dog. Like, Lamar Jackson was a one-man wrecking crew at the University of Louisville. And there are other quarterbacks who are ahead of Lamar Jackson who also carried their programs. Lamar Jackson probably would have been a lot higher on this list if he was able to get Louisville to an ACC championship game. But this dude was one of the best quarterbacks, not just one of the best, but one of the most talented quarterbacks that we've had in college football since 2010, man. This guy was a pretty solid passer, even though he wasn't as good as a passer at Louisville like he is now at the NFL level, he still was pretty consistent. His wide receiving core wasn't really good. I don't even think that Louisville had any other NFL wide receivers on that roster that are playing in the NFL currently. And then once Lamar Jackson ended up leaving Louisville's program, that whole entire Louisville football team just completely derailed, and Bobby Petrino ultimately ended up getting fired. But the year Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy, bruh, like everybody was talking about Lamar. This dude had 51 total touchdowns, bruh. This dude was one of the most electric players in college football in the last decade, bruh. Like Lamar Jackson kind of put Louisville on the map in a sense. Now, even though Louisville already had some pretty good quarterback play prior to Lamar Jackson taking over the reins there and Teddy Bridgewater, like, many people started paying attention to Louisville when Lamar Jackson started going off. Do you remember that incredible duel him and Deshaun Watson had when Louisville matched up against Clemson? Like, that was one of the better games that I can remember being played in the ACC. That's when we had peak ACC football. That's when the ACC was at its best. Lamar Jackson was a real dog at the University of Louisville, man. Like, you probably could make the argument and say that Lamar Jackson deserves to be a lot higher on this list. Like, if I was making this list solely off of talent, Lamar Jackson probably would be second. I can't tell y'all who's number one is, but you guys probably already know who number one is going to be. But Lamar Jackson is one of the most talented quarterbacks that ever come through college football since 2010. He had an incredible arm. He was a fantastic athlete. This dude ran for over 1,400 yards in back-to-back seasons, bro. Like, defenses had no answers for Lamar Jackson. Now, late in the season at times, he ended up struggling against Kentucky. He ended up having a really awful bowl game against LSU. But this man, Lamar Jackson, carried the Louisville football program on his shoulders, man. And the only reason I have him above Bryce Young is just because this dude was way more dynamic than what Bryce Young was, bro. Like, Lamar Jackson, every time this dude had a big rushing touchdown, it was going viral on social media, man. Like, in 2016, the year Lamar Jackson won Heisman, bro, you just could not escape Lamar Jackson. Every time you check Twitter, it was Lamar Jackson on your news feed. Every time you was on Instagram, it was Lamar Jackson, bro. Like, this dude was one of the most polarizing players in college football in the past decade, bro. Like, Lamar Jackson was a super incredible player during his time at Louisville, man. He's one of my favorite players currently in the NFL, and a lot of people doubted Lamar Jackson going into the NFL. He was the last pick of the draft by the Baltimore Ravens when he came out. So this man, Lamar Jackson, man, this dude is number 7 for me. One of the most electric quarterbacks in all of college football since 2010. Probably the most electric if we're just going off of pure skill set, man. Like, this dude was probably the most elusive quarterback out of all of these QBs that I have on this list, bro. Like, this dude was fast. Some people say that he ran like a 4.2, maybe a high 4.3, but his acceleration, the way that players and opposing defensive coordinators describe it, bro, they make it seem like this dude is like a Lamborghini. Like, once this dude gets going, gets like 0 to 100 in a snap of a finger, bro. I loved watching Lamar Jackson play at Louisville. Number 6, man, I got that boy Deshaun Watson, bro. Deshaun Watson was really him. And when you think about the kind of quarterback play that Clemson's program was receiving, you think about Trevor Lawrence, but before Trevor Lawrence, you had Deshaun Watson. And this dude gave Alabama a lot of problems. A lot of problems, bro. And my guy Juice, a.k.a. Jamont, he even makes the argument and says that Deshaun Watson should have won a Heisman Trophy over Derrick Henry, which I strongly disagree with, but I understand where it's coming from. Deshaun Watson was a real dude during his time at the University of Clemson. And not just that, but this dude was really electric. He was really dynamic. Now, he wasn't as dynamic as Lamar Jackson, but what separated him from Lamar Jackson is that in big games, Deshaun Watson always came up big. Even when they lost to Alabama in the college football playoffs their first go around, you kind of already had a feeling that there is going to be a rematch the following season after. And then they match up against Alabama in the national championship game, And they end up winning that thing thanks to a last-minute touchdown. He rolls out, hits, who was it? Hunter Renfrow in the corner of the end zone for the touchdown, and end up dethroning the big bad of college football and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Like, Deshaun Watson, man, like, he's kind of a pop culture figure when you think of Clemson football. Like, when you think of Clemson football, who's the first player that comes to your mind? It probably has to be either Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, or Trevor Lawrence. It has to be one of those four players, but to me, it's Deshaun Watson. Not just was he one of the most productive players in college football and one of the most talented, but this dude was one of the most clutchest QBs. Every time the game was on the line, he came through in big situations. Deshaun Watson rose to the occasion. He comes in at number 6 for me, man, and even to this day in the NFL, he still is rising to the occasion. Even though last season, 2022, didn't really go all that well with the Cleveland Browns, he was a little bit rusty. But Deshaun Watson, bro, he was him when he was playing for Houston, or for Clemson, excuse me, and Clemson had a really good run of quarterbacks. Before Deshaun Watson, you had Tajh Boyd. When I end up making my list of college football's most underrated QBs, Tajh Boyd is most definitely going to be on that list, but Clemson had a really good run of QBs, man. Tajh Boyd, Deshaun Watson, who really Deshaun Watson kind of kicked the door down for Clemson. When Deshaun Watson ended up taking over the reins at QB for Clemson, that's really where, or when, Clemson started to solidify themselves as a national powerhouse. Before Deshaun Watson, Clemson was really just known as being a really good program in the ACC, being really consistent, but on the national level, they weren't really as big until Deshaun Watson came over. And then Deshaun Watson leads them to the college football playoffs, then eventually leads them in the national championship, and then that's where everybody starts to recognize Clemson of being one of the more dominant programs in the sport. Clemson wasn't a blue blood program when Deshaun Watson took over that thing. Yeah, they had some really good receivers and a really good offense, but Deshaun Watson really propelled Clemson into the national spotlight. Now we're about to get into my top 5, and there's going to be some really heated discussions about this one, but I got to go with Baker Mayfield, bro. There's no way you can tell me that Baker Mayfield was not him. I know a lot of you guys don't like Baker Mayfield. He hasn't really been a good NFL QB. His NFL career hasn't really panned out all that well. But this dude, when he was playing for Oklahoma, bro, this dude was super electric, bro. This dude did nothing but produce the 3 years he was starting at QB for the Sooners. You remember that classic game that Oklahoma had in one of the semifinal games against Georgia? When they were up big and then Georgia climbed back into that game and they won it in overtime when they had Jake Fromm at QB. I remember when Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma, early into one season, they had beat Ohio State. And then they went into the middle of the field and they planted their flag. That was one of the most memorable moments that I remember in the past decade of college football. And the reason why I keep saying the past decade is because I'm only 21 years old, so a lot of you guys probably been watching football way longer than I've been around. But Baker Mayfield, to me, is one of the most memorable college football quarterbacks that I think of when I think about some of the best to ever play since 2010. Baker Mayfield, say what you want to say about his NFL career, but when he was playing for Oklahoma, bruh, he was clicking on all cylinders, bruh. This dude was nearly a Heisman finalist the 3 years he was at Oklahoma. He did nothing but put up great numbers and came up big for Oklahoma in really big games and really big moments. There's not too many games that Baker Mayfield had at Oklahoma where he crapped the bid. And he wasn't the most dynamic athlete. He wasn't the most talented. As a matter of fact, this dude was a walk-on. This dude played with a certain intensity. He played with a certain chip on his shoulder that I don't think too many quarterbacks on this list really had. This dude was really driven. He was the prime definition of hard work and dedication. He had to walk on at Texas Tech, transfers to Oklahoma, and I believe he had to walk on again. And he was on starting like Baker Mayfield was the true underdog story of college football when he was playing at Oklahoma. You talk about really rooting for the Cinderella, bro. Like, a lot of people were really rooting for Baker Mayfield. You may not have liked Baker Mayfield because he came off super cocky at times, really immature. But damn it, bro, Baker Mayfield was a real dog at Oklahoma, bro. When I think of Oklahoma football, I think of Baker Mayfield planting that flag in the middle of Buckeye Stadium. Baker Mayfield was really him when he was playing at Oklahoma. Whether you like him or not, you got to admit that Baker Mayfield was a damn good quarterback at the collegiate level. Coming in at number 4, I got Johnny Football. Johnny Football, man. Like, Johnny Manziel, I was really hurt when Johnny Manziel became a bust for the Cleveland Browns, bro. That really effed me up. I was really messed up about Johnny Manziel. Like, Johnny Manziel probably has to be one of the most popular football players in the history of college football, bro. Like, Johnny Football, the house that Johnny built at Texas A&M, he really put Texas A&M in the national spotlight. Because think about what happened to Texas A&M when Johnny Manziel left for the NFL. Kevin Sumlin, he ended up proving to not be a good coach. And not too soon after, he got fired. But when Johnny Manziel was at the helm at QB, bro, this dude was one of the most popular players in the sport. If they had NIL back then when Johnny Manziel was playing, without a doubt, he would have had a $1 million NIL deal. This dude would have been plastered on so many commercials. And he really, in my opinion, put Texas A&M on the map. And some of you guys may not remember this, but at the time when Johnny Manziel was the starting QB for Texas A&M, they had just entered the SEC from the Big 12, them in Missouri, and he was going ham. You remember that play when he had ended up breaking out of that one sack by that Alabama defender? He ends up turning around and going backwards and then just throwing the football in the middle of the field. He was just like, F it, somebody down there. It was on 3rd down, and then that dude, number 18, came down with it, and then the announcer like, oh my God, and I was like, oh my God, like, that boy Johnny Football was a real dog for real, man. That boy used to get Alabama a lot of problems. He used to have Nick Saban on the sideline sweating. Like, Nick Saban, every time they got done playing Texas A&M, he used to be like, phew, Johnny Manziel. Johnny Football, man. Like, y'all forget how big Johnny Manziel was. Like, some of the biggest, most popular college football players of my generation: Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, DeAnthony Thomas, Tavon Austin. Like, Johnny Manziel was really that dude for real when he was at Texas A&M. Like, he really put this program on the map. And if you're a Texas A&M fan, let me know if I'm tripping. But let's be honest, even though Texas A&M was solid, it's not like they were bums before Johnny Manziel was the QB, but it's not like too many people were talking about Texas A&M football on a national level until Johnny Manziel took over at QB. I'm going to just keep it a stack with you. Once Johnny Manziel left Texas A&M, I only kept up with the program because I viewed them as the team that had Johnny Manziel at QB. You can literally call Texas A&M their field that they play on the house that Johnny built. Because Johnny Manziel really is what gave Texas A&M all that national recognition. And even though this dude is one of the greatest busts in the history of the NFL, this dude's name still brings in numbers when you talk about it in a college football sense. Like, if you bring a recruit to Texas A&M and they meet Johnny Manziel, they're going to be like, damn, this is Johnny Football. Like, Johnny Manziel is one of the greatest college football quarterbacks ever. Now, I don't know where you rank him all time, but he damn sure is up there in the top 10, bro. Like, Johnny Manziel was a real dog for Texas A&M. And this man also had Mike Evans. Like, Johnny Manziel was one of the funnest players to watch in college football in the 2010s, bro. Like, when you think of premier quarterback play in college football, you think Johnny Manziel. If you were to name your top 5 most memorable QBs that first come to your mind from the early 2010s, Johnny Manziel is up there on that list, bro. This dude was ginormous. I mean, this dude was super popular. This dude was super fun to watch. He was dynamic. He was fun television. He just had a little bit of a different attitude to him, man. He was prime time. He was Hollywood. Shoot, you may not have liked Johnny Manziel because he was a huge party boy, but when this dude played for Texas A&M, this dude balled out. I loved watching Johnny Manziel. He was the reason in middle school I got number 2. I was effed up by Johnny Manziel throwing up the show me the money signs. I remember when Johnny Manziel used to do this. He used to do this. Like, everybody used to go around the country doing this. Like, Drake name dropped Johnny Manziel in a song, dog. Before this man even got drafted in the NFL. Draft Day by Drake. Look up Draft Day by Drake if you never heard that song. Draft Day, Johnny Manziel. Come on, man. Like, Johnny Manziel, regardless of how you view and how you feel about his NFL career, this man had one of the greatest careers in college football. He was one of the most popular players to ever play the game of college football, man. And I know it's just my opinion, but I think the majority of you guys are going to agree with me on that. Johnny Manziel was a real animal when he was playing for Texas A&M, bro. Like, this dude had all kinds of crazy plays. I remember it was one time they were playing some team in a bowl game. I think it was Louisiana Tech. I don't really remember it verbatim, but he ended up jumping over a defensive lineman and then ended up, like, throwing the ball. Like, Johnny Manziel used to be doing all kinds of crazy shit, dog. Johnny Manziel was one of the funnest players to watch when I was watching college football, at least when I first got into it in the early 2010s, man. Like, he really is what made me a fan of college football. I was like, damn, you don't really be seeing this in the NFL. In the NFL, you just see fundamentally sound quarterback play. But in college football, you got this dude breaking out of sacks, running backwards, tossing the ball in the middle of the field. Like, this man used to have me turned. I used to love watching Johnny Manziel play when I was legit, bro. I was real effed up about Johnny Manziel. For real. And a lot of people were really messed up about Johnny Manziel. Like, I was really rooting for bro to get right when he got drafted by the Cleveland Browns. Like, it really hurt me when he was tripping off the field, not being able to get right, and when he wasn't able to make it work as an NFL QB for the Browns. Like, I was really hurt about that. I really wanted Johnny Manziel to succeed. I was a really big Johnny Manziel fan. Even to this day, like, you can't tell me nothing about Johnny Manziel. For real. Like, I'm just sorry, but when it comes to Johnny football, I just lose all common sense. Johnny Manziel was a real dog when he was playing for Texas A&M, bro. Like, some of y'all forget, Johnny Manziel put Texas A&M on the map. When you think of that stadium, whatever it's called, they need to change the name of that thing. They need to change Texas A&M Stadium to the house that Johnny built. Like, for real. Johnny Manziel really put the Aggies on the map. And if you think I'm tripping, man, like, you need to go back and watch a few highlights and read what people used to write about Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was that dude. He was that boy. Like, I know his NFL career didn't work out, but in college football, bro, this dude is like an icon. He's like a legend in the history of college football, man. Like, when you think of Texas A&M, like, you go up to any casual football fan, right? I'm not talking about you diehards out there. When you ask a casual football fan to tell you who's the first player that comes to mind when you think of Texas A&M football, they're going to tell you Johnny Manziel. At least 95% of them, and I can bet money on this, bro. Like, if they had NIL back then when Johnny Manziel was playing, bro, this dude would have been cashing out. He might not have even came out as early. This dude would have been making $1 million if we had NIL back then when he was playing for A&M. Like, he was really carrying Kevin Sumlin, him and Mike Evans. Because once them boys left, Kevin Sumlin and Texas A&M football, they went, like, for real. Them boys were down in the gutter for a couple years. Them boys ain't come back until they had Kellen Mond. For real. Like, Johnny Manziel, when they talk about Texas A&M football, like, he really put them boys on the map. He really put Texas A&M on the map, dog. Number 3. I got Jameis, Mr. Crab Legs Winston, bro. Like, Jameis Winston, he may not have been as electric and dynamic as some of the other guys on this list, like Lamar Jackson and Johnny Manziel and RG3, but I will always remember Jameis Winston because all of those damn comebacks Florida State used to have, bro. Like, this dude would throw 1 million interceptions in the first half. Then the second half, I don't know what just happened, but this dude used to just turn his game up to a different level. And I'm a Miami Hurricane fan. Like, I remember in 2013 when them boys came in and they crashed us. I had to turn the game off. That's one of the few times I've ever had to turn off a Miami Hurricanes football game. Like, Jameis Winston was really snapping for Florida State. Like, there was a point when Jameis Winston, bro, he was a really big name too. Now, when you had that whole incident with the crab legs and you had the little sexual assault stuff that was coming up, I was like, damn, Jameis, damn, what's going on? But when this dude was playing on the field, this dude used to show up and show out. Especially when they were down big. Like, you remember when people tried to accuse him of potentially being down or forcing Florida State to be down and making them come back because he was like having somebody who was betting on the games or something like that. It's like a weird conspiracy theory that people have, but a lot of people who remember Jameis Winston at Florida State, like, you knew Jameis was that dude. That dude in the biggest moments, that dude used to show up. I literally cried when Jameis Winston and FSU had played against Notre Dame, and they beat Notre Dame, bro. Like, Notre Dame was up, and then Florida State ended up coming back, and then Notre Dame ended up throwing the touchdown that ended up getting called back because of offensive pass interference. Like, I cried. That's how much I hated Florida State. I did not like Florida State. But this man, Jameis Winston, bro, like, this dude used to come up big in every big game. Like, this dude did not lose. Like, I think one of the few losses he took was to Oregon. And the Oregon just, they bent them boys over and gave him a spanking. But the year that boy won the Heisman Trophy, bro, he was going off. You may say Jameis Winston may be a little bit too high on this list, man, but that boy Jameis Winston, like, he just had that dog in him. For real. That boy Jameis Winston, game on the line, you down the touchdown, with 2 minutes left, you wanted to put the ball in his hands. This dude was one of the clutchest quarterbacks in college football during the 2010s. For real. There weren't too many QBs who had the ice in their veins like Jameis Winston did. Jameis Winston had them boys rolling. You remember when they played at Auburn in the National Championship? What was that? That was what? Gus Malzahn's first season? When they had, Nick Marshall at QB? And they had that big, they had the kick six against Bama, dog? Like, college football was lit as hell the year Jameis Winston won a Heisman Trophy, man. Like, I miss the BCS era. I really do, even though the BCS was some BS. But during that era of college football, I think that's when college football was at its peak. For real. And let me know if you agree with this, man. But that boy Jameis Winston was a real dog. A real dog, man. The year he won the Heisman Trophy, bro, he was snapping. And the year after that, he kind of took a step back because he had all those damn turnovers and interceptions, but it didn't matter. Because some way, somehow, he used to always find a way to will Florida State back into the game and to find a way to win. It used to always piss me off. Because I used to go to middle school with a bunch of Florida State fans, and every time FSU was down, I used to go on Facebook. I used to be like, yeah, like, y'all boys finna take an L today. And then after halftime, that boy Jameis Winston come out just slinging that rock, and I used to be like, damn, bro, like, what is it with this dude, man? Why you just don't lose? Like, how you gonna play bad? How you gonna play like garbage in the first half, and then all of a sudden, you look like the next great thing since Tim Tebow in the second half? Like, I really could not stand watching Jameis Winston play. As a Hurricane fan, I used to not like this dude for real because of how good he was. This dude used to always come through in the second half. Like, I could not believe it. And you would think, like, week after week after week after week, like, eventually they would have their time. But no. Like, every single week, every time they down at halftime, them boys come right back out and start slinging that thing with Jameis Winston, dog. Slinging that rock. And Jameis Winston is the best quarterback that Jimbo Fisher has ever had. Like, ever since Jameis Winston left FSU, Jimbo Fisher has not had a quarterback that's been even remotely close to as good as what Jameis Winston has been. Jameis Winston was a real dog when he was playing for the Seminoles, bruh. For real. Got them boys in the national championship. Them boys had hella comebacks like every single week. I remember that ACC championship game, man. I thought they was really going to lose to Georgia Tech. They did it. They did it like nearly every single week. And for those of you guys who remember college football at that time, you remember exactly what I was talking about. Like, this dude used to have so many damn comebacks. You used to think every single week, like, they ain't going to be able to pull it off. Like, this finally the week they take an L. But he used to do it every single week. He used to frustrate the hell out of me, man. I was like, damn, why y'all boys just don't lose? Because now I got to go to school and hear all these FSU fans in my ear. At number 2, I got Joe Burrow. I don't think too much needs to be said about what Joe Burrow did during his time at LSU. His first season at LSU was average, but after that, them boys just snapped. Like, it was just a perfect storm. This dude, he wasn't the most physically gifted QB. He wasn't the most physically imposing QB. He wasn't even the most talented QB. But Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, aka Mr. Joe Shiesty, like, this dude's demeanor just was different. This dude was just cut from a different cloth. Like, I remember during his first season when they were playing UCF in the bowl game, he threw an interception. He got smashed. Motherfucker came and crack blocked him. And then after that, that boy came back and started throwing dimes. That boy got activated. Like, Joe Burrow taking that big hit against that UCF defender. That was the worst thing UCF could have done, because after that, that boy Joe Burrow just locked in. He just got into a different bag. And then that year after, 2019, when that boy won a Heisman, and at the time he broke college football's record for most passing touchdowns in the season. Eventually, that was broken by Bailey Zappi. Like, that LSU 2019 is one of the best teams in college football history. Now, some people even say it's the best team in college football history. I'm not going to go that far, because, you know, a lot of the old heads, they're going to tell you about Nebraska in the 80s and the old Miami Hurricane teams, and we ain't going to get into all that. But when Joe Burrow was playing, bro, in 2019, that was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, single-season performance that we've ever seen from a quarterback. And you may say Joe Burrow may not deserve to be this high, because you may be basing it on overall careers, and he didn't have the amount of high-level play as some of the other guys behind him did. But that one lone season, I think, makes up for that, man. Like, this man threw what? 60 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions, man? Like, the way they beat Alabama had Nick Saban pissed. Nick Saban was really heated with how LSU was cocky after they beat them. Like, after that season, Alabama, before the game, right, Nick Saban was interviewed by one of the reporters, and they asked him about last season and all of LSU's antics after the game, and that boy Nick Saban said that we finna come in here and change the way they think. And they did. They mopped the floor with them boys. Like, that's how bad that LSU did Alabama, and the game was really entertaining. It was really close. It's not even like LSU blew them out. It's just the way they went about beating them, the way they went after about it in the game. Like, they just had a different swagger to them. Like, one thing about that boy Joe Burrow, like, that boy got a lot of swag. I don't care if nobody tells me, like, that boy Joe Burrow was cut different. I don't know what the hell is into this man's genes or into his bloodstream, but this man just has a different mentality. For real, this man was a cold-blooded killer at times on the field. He was so cerebral. It's like, no matter what you do at this dude, no matter how many times he got hit, no matter if he had a guy who was 300 pounds crap blocking him off an interception, like, this dude used to lock in. Like, in 2019, that was one of the greatest seasons ever for a QB. Probably the greatest season ever for a quarterback. And he wasn't even super dynamic running the football. He could do that too. It's just like Joe Burrow, when he had to get it done, he got it done. And they had Justin Jefferson, Terrence Marshall, Jamar Chase. They had Randy Moss's son. They had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They had a fantastic offensive line that won the Joe Burrow Award. They were stacked on defense. Like, that LSU team, this was the perfect storm. And the main reason for that was because of Joe Burrow. People forget, like, LSU always been wide receiver U. Like, they always had great QB. They always had great wide receiver play. They just always had average to below average QB play. Like, them boys, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, Juice, them boys had Zach Mensberger at QB. Like, them boys would have had Joe Burrow back then, back in 2013, 2014, or whenever, when OBJ and Jarvis Landry were playing, them boys probably would have turned up and won a national championship too. Especially that year when they lost to Alabama in the BCS National Championship game, when they had Pat Pete, Honey Badger. I mean, if they would have had Joe Burrow back then, them boys most definitely would have gave it to Alabama. For real. I love me some Joe Burrow, man. You can't tell me nothing about that dude. I love me some Joe Burrow. That boy in 2019, like, he was going off. He was setting off college football. And you guys already know who's number one, bruh. Cam Newton. Like, when I first started watching college football in 2010, and I was watching Cam Newton play, I was a third grader at the time. And I didn't really know too much about football. I just turned it on and just started watching it. And I used to watch Auburn play, and I used to see Cam Newton. I was like, damn, bro, like, why do they have an offensive lineman at QB? But this dude was unstoppable. This dude is one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history, probably the greatest. He carried Auburn to the national championship. Who the hell on that Auburn championship team made it to the NFL? I think some dudes might have got tryouts, but nobody who was actually good off that team. Like, that boy Cam Newton was a one-man wrecking crew. That man, the year he won the Heisman, accounted for 50 touchdowns, 20 on the ground, 30 through the air. This dude was a damn bully. He was like the equivalent to putting your fullback at QB, but he just knows how to throw the football really good. Like, this man, Cam Newton, was damn near unstoppable. Either he could beat you with his arm, because he had one of the strongest arms in college football during that year, or he could beat you with his legs. I remember there was one play when they were playing LSU, this dude had a big touchdown run. Like, this dude was just a big man at QB, just hauling ass at QB, and just dying defenses up. It's like you had no answer for that man. For real. Like, that boy Cam Newton was really him. And even when he got to the league, like, he was still him. He won an MVP. He took Carolina to the Super Bowl. Like, I think a lot of people still don't really give Cam Newton the credit he deserves. Even in college football, like, that was the single greatest performance that we've ever seen from a QB. And I know I sound a little bit of a hypocrite because I just said that about Joe Burrow, but now I think about Cam Newton and I think about that third grade me watching this man play. I used to be like, damn, who's this big dude at QB who's just unstoppable? He's stiff-arming guys. Like, this dude was kind of like Derrick Henry at QB. Like, Auburn had a cheat code with Cam Newton at QB, dog. And what was even more fun about it was that these boys came out of nowhere. They came out of nowhere. This dude, Cam Newton, the year before he went to Auburn, was playing out of JUCO. Because he had left Florida. Remember, they said he had stole a laptop. He tried to throw it out the window and something like that. So this man goes to, Blaine College, a JUCO down in Texas. He ends up snapping, and he goes to Auburn. And his only season starting as a college football QB takes them to the national championship game, man. If that's not the definition of an underdog, if that's not the definition of being counted out, I don't know what to tell you. Cam Newton damn near might be the greatest QB in college football history. Do y'all think Cam Newton's going to make it to the College Football Hall of Fame? Like, he has to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. Like, you cannot tell the story of college football without mentioning Cam Newton. You can't. It's just certain players that you just have to talk about when you're discussing 2010 college football. And it all starts with Cam Newton. What he did that 2010 season was legendary. This dude was a one-man wrecking crew. This dude was a wrecking ball. You had no answer for this dude. If you was the safety and you saw this man coming at you, you better move out the way. Because he was going to either run through you or run over you. Either or. Like, Cam Newton, third grade me was just so superly impressed with Cam Newton. Just a guy of that size, with that athleticism. That was something that we haven't really seen before. He's kind of paved the way for a lot of QBs that are now in the NFL, like Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson. Every time there's a big QB that's 6'3 plus or 6'4, that's over 230, they always get compared to Cam Newton. Cam Newton really paved the way for a lot of QBs, and what a lot of people forget is that at the time, when he went to the NFL, he was coming out of a spread offense. You remember how people used to be like, man, you got to come from a pro-style offense. Quarterbacks that come from the spread really don't work out. Like, he really changed the narrative with that. It's just like the stigma that people had about the air raid offense. If you come from the air raid offense, you'll never be successful at the NFL level. Like, Cam Newton really was a trendsetter for real. He was a trailblazer. He really paved the way for a lot of the QBs that are in the game right now. But these are my top 10 college football quarterbacks of the 2010s, or my top 10 college football quarterbacks since 2010. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section down below.